Perhaps the most important position to master as a fantasy hockey guru is who you got man in your blue paint, which is why on the latest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, it's a classic top 10 countdown of the best goaltenders in the fantasy game. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Wednesday, September the 17th. It's a goalie special, my hockey degenerates, and you are here on your 30-minute daily source for fantasy hockey, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and we are ready to go breaking down the top 10 best fantasy netminders that you need to own this year, 0G or otherwise, Mr. Rodin. You got to know who's in the top 10, or at least who's lurking. We each have a list, 10 through 6 on today's episode, 5 through 1 on Thursday's show. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 wager hits. I'm going to keep that preamble as short and sweet as I can, pal, because we know that this is a fickle position to handle. You know, it's one that's taken me down. I'm going to be real in the past, and it's one that you and I sometimes look differently. I'm curious to see who we have, especially near the end of this list on today's show. I think the top is pretty set in stone, but either way, over to you, top 10 fantasy netminders, 10 through 6.
Yeah, well, comparing our list, we had exactly the same goaltenders 1 through 7, a little bit different when it got 8 through 10. Okay. I had Dustin Wolf at the 10 spot. He cracks the top 10 for me. I thought he was outstanding last year with the Calgary Flames in his first full season in the National Hockey League, getting over 50 games played, 50 starts, a great record of 29-16-8, a 9-10 save percentage, a 2.64 goals against average. The Calgary Flames were in the better half of the league in goals against average, finishing 15th amongst the 32 teams in the league. Dustin Wolf was a top 10 fantasy hockey goaltender last year as well. He finished, he was ranked 9th at the end of the regular season. He was actually ranked 11th at the end of the regular season. He's ranked 9th going into this season. I think the downside with Dustin Wolf potentially is that blue line in front of him. You know, it's not the strongest in the National Hockey League, really, outside of Mackenzie Weegar. There's not a lot of fantasy options on the blue line. I know we talked about Rasmus Andersson a little bit as well, you know, what Zane Parekh can bring to the table offensively for them. But we did talk about what the potential is for him defensively, maybe losing sight because he is so offensive mindset with his game. I still like what Dustin Wolf brings to the table for the Calgary Flames. He really can transcend this team into that contention area. When we talk about the St. Louis Blues, when we talk about the Utah Mammoth, they were right there last year, just missing out on the playoffs by 1 point, I believe. And I think a guy like Dustin Wolf, especially in those keeper leagues, dynasty, he's one of those goaltenders you want to draft very early and stash him going in for the next 4, 5, 6 seasons of your keeper leagues.
I totally agree. I guess what I would say is you're spot on right about the fantasy value and the sexy names in the Calgary Flames blue line. I think I buy into them a little bit more in terms of their ability to insulate Dustin Wolf, at least from a defensive standpoint. And I get it. Jake Bean, Kevin Ball, these guys don't jump off the page. I think they're serviceable. I understand they're not sexy. I have him a little bit higher. I'll talk about it and try and sell you on it a little later in the episode, but not by much, Steele. And I like that we had the top 7 the same. And I think that makes sense. And I appreciate it because Linus Ullmark coming into this season, I have him at the 10 spot. Let's get the obvious out of the way early. He clearly had some issues settling in Ottawa last year into a new team where he is for the first time in his career, or at least for sure for the first time in his career, the number one guy. He did struggle at times in the postseason against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Some muffins there. Not a ton of confidence from those performances. But what I did see was enough for me to buy into this guy as a top 10 goaltender. And the main thing is, I'll get to it in a second, 25 wins, 14 losses. He does have a .909 save percentage, which I believe will go up, 4 shutouts. There's a lot of value in this goaltender. And you will stand by me on this one that I expect the Ottawa Senators to be in the mix for a top 3 spot in the Atlantic. Yeah, that's a stretch, maybe considering what we have to go through as Toronto Maple Leafs fans, but maybe it isn't when we saw exactly that in the postseason last year in terms of how close this team is. So for me, Linus Ullmark, he had 25 wins in a quote-unquote tough year. I see 30-plus wins. There is no one challenging him for the cage in Ottawa. He will have 50-plus starts easy. I like Linus Ullmark here big time at 10. I don't know what your take is, but over to you.
He's a really good fantasy option. He didn't crack the top 10 for me. Again, struggled obviously last year, but with how the team is shaping up right now with Jake Sanderson just elevating his game over the last year as well. You expect him to be, defended a lot more, or, helped a lot more in the defensive end with where the team is going. However, he didn't crack the top 10 for me.
Okay.
I went with the counterpart in Ontario and Anthony Stolarz at the number 9 position. Look, to me, it's crazy not to have him in the top 10. He was a top 5 goaltender last year, even with the 34 games played. Look, I know there's injury risk. I know there's a 50-50 split risk with Joseph Woll as well. Doesn't matter to me. The fact that he goes out and he puts up 21 wins, 8 losses, 3 ties, 4 shutouts with a .926 save percentage and 2.14 goals against average, it's outstanding to me. He is one of the most calmest goaltenders in the league right now. He's not frantic. He doesn't panic. I can't remember a time last season where he was blown out of a game with just letting, really bad goals in. He's just a very strong goaltender to me. And again, there is some risk with the 50-50 split, with the injury he had last year, even with the concussion in the playoffs, and the fact that really last year was the one time he was a starter in the league. He's worked his way up to this moment. I think it's his moment. Even at 31, 32 years old, he's proven over the last 2 years with Florida, with Toronto now, that he can be a really good goaltender and one of the best goaltenders in fantasy hockey. So he cracks the top 9. He cracks the top 10. He comes in at number 9. I think he's outstanding. And I had him on multiple of my teams last year, and he was sensational.
He was, and I don't think having him out of the top 10 is crazy, especially when you said it yourself, and these goalies here that I have will almost certainly play more games, and that is just a much safer and, in my opinion, smarter angle to take. However, you did better than me with both of those teams last year, Steele, and Anthony Stolarz was sensational. So I'm going to give you credit where credit is due. However, I'm going to take Linus Ullmark all day. I'm going to take my guy Ilya Sorokin all day here at number 9 over Anthony Stolarz. And I know the Toronto Maple Leafs might have a lot more in that offensive tank and more success this season than the New York Islanders. For obvious reasons, their special teams last year was woeful, and we know that the up top forward group is not exactly something that you want to get behind. However, Ilya Sorokin had his second most wins of his career last year with that exact same team. 61 games, 30 wins, 4 shutouts. I love this player, so this is a classic case, I think, of us sticking to our guns on this one. This is a guy that I will be regularly going after. You know what you get with this guy, Steele. He's just in his prime at 30 years old for a goaltender. He has been sensational over his career, .916 save percentage. I know that save percentage was down, and I just reamed off some career highs, and that's a career low, .907 save percentage. So that's a concern. I'll be real. But at the same time, there aren't many goaltenders in this realm of where I think he goes, 8th, 9th, 10th goalies off the board that I trust so consistently. We have Stolarz with some injuries. We have him as a perennial backup. One good year, sure. But I like Sorokin a little safer. Maybe the team isn't as good. I like him here at number 9. I like this list, though, already. Lots of good options.
There are plenty of good options. I couldn't give it to Ilya Sorokin just because of how the New York Islanders team is set right now and, projecting them for being a bottom 5 team. Again, we've talked about Matt Barzal. We've talked about Jonathan Drouin, Matthew Schaefer coming into the lineup potentially as well. I just don't see the team being successful, which is surprising because Usually they are my dark horse team every
you
single
love that.
season.
Mm-hmm.
When we come back after the break, more top 10 goaltenders. Keep these names circled going into the fantasy hockey draft in the next couple of weeks, and make sure you're set in stone with those goalies.
Something that you can always be working on, Steele. Sometimes a work in progress, especially for our 0G friends out there. We'll talk about that after the break as well. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface, on your laptop or phone. Monarch Money is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and feel in control of your money finally, even without touching a single spreadsheet. I'm liking this one, Steele. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to smash that subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review for your boys here, Flip Livingstone and Steele Rodin. Flip, when you sent me your list, this was the one that shocked me. This is the one that my jaw dropped.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe you left this goaltender off your top 10. And it's Filip Gustavsson of the Minnesota Wild. You talk very highly about him. I've talked very highly about him. And
I did.
We expected the bounce back season. That's what we got. A .914 save percentage, a 2.56 goals against average, 31 wins, 19 losses, 6 overtime losses with 5 shutouts. And he did all of this, again, without Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson in the lineup for more than half the season. So defensively, he was let down a little bit, but he still rallied behind his team and got them into the playoffs. And honestly, I still think they deserve to win that first round against Vegas. It was unbelievable, the finish that happened in that first round. Very good series. But I look at Filip Gustavsson, and a guy who had a career high .931 save percentage a couple of seasons ago. He's very efficient, calm, cool play style, excellent positioning at all times. I think, again, with the way he played last year without his best players in the lineup, I'm expecting even more from him. And when you look at the Minnesota Wild team, which a lot of people don't do, they don't watch Minnesota hockey. They play a very low event style structured hockey.
That's a fact.
There's not a lot of exciting things going on, obviously, besides Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy when they do their things. But that low-level structured hockey that they play, it supports goalies well. So while they were in the worst or bottom half of the league in goals against last year, he was sensational. He had a 23.4 goals saved above average without his best players in the lineup, with a down season from Brock Faber. You get a guy in Zeev Buim as well, which we lightly talked about in our rookies prospects episode the other week. I'm really expecting big things from Filip Gustavsson. Very surprised you left him off your top 10.
6th in the NHL in wins, 4th in the NHL in shots against. That blue line allowed a lot of rubber against. And they play low impact hockey, low incident hockey. I like what you're getting at here. I'm not buying into the Wild like you are. I am, though, going to admit that your jaw should have probably dropped. I had him there right at 10. I'm buying into Linus Ullmark a little bit more for the team value around him. This guy, pure goaltending talent, and that's something at times that I've struggled to separate. I love this guy, but I like these players more. So I like that you're chirping me. It's a fair chirp. Bit of a slip on my part. However, I do think that you'll see very similar value out of the goaltenders that I have around at this same spot. And I have Dustin Wolf at 8. And maybe it's a tall ask because it's a small sample size from Dustin Wolf in his career, but he was already absolutely owning the AHL level, and he comes to this Calgary Flames team. And maybe this is, again, where we differ. I was trying to get at it a little bit in terms of, I think this team is better than what they look like on paper. I'm not talking fantasy. I'm talking about propping up Dustin Wolf's value in fantasy. So I'm liking him here at the 8th spot. I appreciate what you're saying about Gustafsson and the angles with Joel Eriksson and Kirill Kaprizov, arguably their two most important forwards after, Boldy in there too. Let's see what these seasons shake out at the start. However, I got Dustin Wolf in here at 8. And what I will say is that was a Western Conference is a lot more open than what I'm seeing in the Eastern Conference, especially if you're talking around, the wild card 8, 7, and 6 spots. So maybe that increases some value for these teams in their goaltenders that'll be around those spots. However, I'm still sticking to my guns. I don't have Gustafsson in my top 10. I appreciate that you're getting at me. Dustin Wolf's at 8. I don't know if you gave me 8, but go ahead with your next guy.
Yeah, I had Philip Gustafsson at number 8. So at number 7, I went with Mackenzie Blackwood. Mm-hmm. So I went Dustin Wolf 10, Stolarz 9, Philip Gustafsson 8, and now I have Mackenzie Blackwood at the number 7 position. And obviously it just goes back to how good this Colorado team is. With Nathan McKinnon, with Cale Makar, getting back Gabriel Landeskog, Martin Necas in the lineup as well. Mackenzie Blackwood has been a guy over the last 2 seasons who has been, fairly good, especially since he got traded to the Colorado Avalanche.
Of course. 56
games played last year, still had maybe too many losses, in my opinion. 28 wins, 21 losses, and six overtime losses with 4 shutouts. Still put up a .912 save percentage and a 2.55 goals against average in the season last year, split between Colorado and San Jose. It's really just backing up the team and how significant he will be a part, again, going into another playoff run. They've kind of struggled in the playoffs over the last couple of years, but
it's true.
I really like Mackenzie Blackwood, especially for the shot volume he sees and the team that is in front of him. So that's why I have him ranked at number 7.
It's interesting because, I don't know if you saw this article or these articles that Matt Larkin's been doing on Daily Faceoff. He's been doing Stanley Cup windows by division. What window wide open, window, like breaking down where these teams are at. And he has the window closing for the Colorado Avalanche, talking about how the team is trending in the wrong direction. And I don't know if I want to fully agree or disagree. I think he's just making a good point here that Mackenzie Blackwood, yes, I think we like him here right in this spot. He doesn't deserve to be any higher, but I don't think you want to overlook him because this is a classic case of what we were just kind of alluding to. The regular season, the Colorado Avalanche are going to get dubs. They're going to get goals. They have 2 studs on the blue line, and they will be there knocking on the door. Are they balanced enough to take down teams in the postseason? And should they be overall perhaps trending in the wrong direction? Sure. Regular season, Mackenzie Blackwood is now etched in stone as a guy who never really got a look, right? Steele, behind a good team. We never saw what he was able to do fully. And we saw it last year at the, in 37 games with Colorado, the .913 save percentage. Intriguing goalie. I don't know how much I'm going to have actual faith making him my number 1. Somehow I would like to get him as a secondary option. I just don't see how that happens. However, Mackenzie Blackwood comes in at 7. I'm so fired up for this season already. We're talking about the Colorado Avalanche perhaps trending in the wrong direction. This is going to be a spicy season, Steele. I have a feeling we're in for a doozy.
They will not be headed in the wrong direction with Nathan McKinnon in the lineup and Cale Makar. This will be a very strong team for the foreseeable future. Very safe. When we come back after the break, we will let you know who cracks the number 6 position in the top 10 fantasy hockey goaltenders. When we come back after the break, this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. We love using FanDuel because it fits exactly how we like to bet, the player props, building those same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, It's easy and the best way to add a little more energy and fun to those Sundays. So, you ready to play? Download FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And thank you so much for sticking with us on this Wednesday episode of the Top 10 Fantasy Hockey Goaltenders going into the 2025-26 season.
Yes, sir.
And Flip, I was a little bit, again, shocked to see where this goaltender was ranked. I think there's a little bit of disrespect on Darcy Kuemper's name going into the season. I can't believe Adin Hill, Dustin Wolf, Ilya Sorokin are ahead of him in these rankings after the phenomenal season he had last year. He was the third best goaltender in fantasy hockey last year, and he had an incredible season. 31 wins, 11 losses, 7 overtime losses, a .921 save percentage, 5 shutouts, a 2.02 goals against average. I mean, those crack the top 5 in all categories across the board here. And the Los Angeles Kings were the second best team in the National Hockey League in goals against last year, only allowing 206 goals. They were second behind the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, Connor Hellebuyck being the best fantasy hockey goaltender, which we'll talk about on tomorrow's episode.
Yes, sir.
But at 35 years old, I was preaching Darcy Kuemper last year. Like, that was a win-win trade for both Washington and LA. They get Pierre-Luc Dubois. They get Darcy Kuemper, their number one guy. And when I look at the Los Angeles Kings, like, you get a full season back of Drew Doughty. I know, people aren't really set on the signings of Cody Ceci, Brian Dumoulin, Joel Edmondson. I still
not
think
sexy.
Not sexy. I think Edmondson's still a solid defenseman. You still got Brant Clark and Mikey Anderson. But the overall team, they play a hard style of game. Like, their forwards always come back. They're helping in the defensive zone. Anze Kopitar still one of the best two-way forward centermen in the game at his age, 37. The disrespect, the slander on Darcy Kuemper, I'm not here for it. He comes in at number 6.
I'm not here for it either, Steele. And I think this team is one of those classic cases then the sum is greater than their parts. They play amazing team hockey. There's not a huge superstar really here. Adrian Kempe, really good player. You got Kevin Fiala, Reclamation Project, and Andrei Kuzmenko, kind of like a ragtag group. We know we've talked about that third line anchored by Philip Deneau and Trevor Moore for the last couple of years with your boy Warren Foegele. When it comes down to Darcy Kuemper, though, I look at it like this before I get to the stats and actually explain it. This guy was behind Nicklas Backstrom in Minnesota for a number of years, really didn't play a ton of games because that was the guy in Minnesota, was a backup, then got some looks, went to Arizona, buried in terms of respect, won a cup behind an amazing team that somehow he gets no credit for. Then he gets his chance in Washington, really kind of underperforms. Then he heads to LA, has a great year, and no one's paying attention. So his storyline is very intriguing, and I think that fits the mold for what you just said. How about a .921 save percentage last year? 2.02 goals against, five shutouts, 31 wins, and
massive. Like
you just said, maybe some more respect on this Kings team. How long have I been coming on this podcast saying the Carolina Hurricanes every year, one of the reasons they are a force and deep in the playoffs, shots allowed on net. They are at the bottom every year. The LA Kings only allowed a half shot more than them on net per game. Good blue line, good goalie, rising stars in their forward group. I'm fine to take Darcy Kuemper as my first goalie this year, Steele. Coming off a heater last year, credit due to you once again. This is a goaltender in his career, before I turn it back over to you to wrap this up, that his numbers also check out. .915 career save percentage, 2.54 goals against, and nearly 40 shutties. Love Darcy Kuemper headed into this season, and the LA Kings, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, again, you want a piece of some of these West Coast teams, LA Kings, Vegas Golden Knights, lots to love with Darcy Kuemper going into the season. So don't disrespect, don't slouch on his name. Getting somewhere drafted, I believe, in that 7th, 8th round range. So, if he falls down to there, maybe even the 9th, I'm going to pick him up. I'm going to draft him. He'll be my number one goaltender as well. If I'm drafting before you, I'm going to take that pick. When we come back for tomorrow's episode, the top 5 goaltenders, Flip and I have the exact same list. You can probably guess it yourself, but we're going to break it down anyways. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, you got to go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, because while the season is around the corner, there is no off season. In the summertime, we bring you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, and we'll see you back here again tomorrow.